before she gets captured again. One of the reasons why I say that I'm a big fan of Waffle is because he's a guy who's actually made a lot of innovations in this game. A lot of the optimizations that he's come up with himself are a lot of very, very fine, very precise, minor changes to already optimized strats and rooms, which I always think is very impressive. Not to just look at something and accept it as the way it is and the way it should be, but to always look for little ways to improve things, including optimizations to something like the Armos strategies and ice physics strategies, like the room we call the Lonely Fire Bar in Ice Palace, but I'll talk more about that when we get closer. In the early stage of this run here, the primary optimizations are movement optimizations. Things like pumping, it's a marginal time save, but more important even than that is just the precision of the movement and the precision of actions. So one of the things we'll look at as a difference between these players is even things as simple as how quickly they pick up a bush after they walk into it, or how quickly they slash a bush after they get the sword. Those are the tiny little differences that can gain the lead in the early game, at least for the first few minutes before we have any major tricks or RNG to affect the run. MaltZi got a little worse RNG in the courtyard there. It's almost hard to even observe that, but he was blocked temporarily, but did the correct way of dealing with that to get around it with minimal time loss. Mitigating difficult RNG is another important optimization in this run. It's maybe not transparent at first view. The first main trick of the game here, killing this guard. Waffle messed it up a little bit. So did MaltZi, but his mistake was a little bit less costly, I'd say. Optimally, a Taz can actually kill that guy faster with 3 slashes, but I don't think I've ever seen a human save time doing that. But if anybody wants to accept that challenge and try to get an optimal room time with 3 slashes, please feel free to do that and show me the video after you do. I'd be happy to see that. Different but equally bad RNG for those 2 players in that room. And the boomerang is the first item that they get in this run. Boomerang is a time save to get. If you skip it, you may save time in just escape, but you'll probably lose time over the course of the entire run because it's a very helpful item for the mitigation of certain RNG patterns and for the execution of specific strategies. So it's definitely an item that they're going to get here. Both going for the 8 slash ball and chain guard. Difficult but fast way to do it. Pinning the guard without having him bounce back and forth and having to juggle in. It's exactly what you want to see. So good kill from both players there. The Zelda rescue song is actually a really cool track, and it's really unfortunate that you only hear a couple seconds of it, because if you hear the entire track, it's actually kind of surprising how complex and beautiful of a song it ends up being after 30 or 40 seconds. So if you're practicing one day and you want to just rescue Zelda and then just stand there for a few minutes, you'll see what I'm saying. The return through the basement here. This is a design element that I do like in games, where the return trip, when you do have to backtrack through a certain area, gives you a shortcut to avoid having to redo some content backwards. Most of the dungeons in the game actually do have features like that. I don't want to get too much into my theories on game design here, though. Good hallway RNG for Waffle. A little worse for MaltZi. Tried to use the boomerang to mitigate part of it. Unfortunately, there was multiple bad elements there trying to cause some problems. After this, we'll be going into the part of Hyrule Castle that we refer to as the sewers. This is where there's a lot more consequential RNG that they're going to have to deal with, and where their ability to react quickly and mitigate the consequences of poor RNG is going to be much more significant, in addition to all the normal movement optimizations. Pleasant enough snake room for both players. Both have good hearts still, so they have nothing to worry about. The snakes do a half a heart of damage. Everything else only does a quarter heart, so they'd have to get knocked around quite a bit to have any concerns in that regard. They're going to be paying attention to any drops that they get from rats during this part of the game. Any rupee drops specifically that they get will help them to identify what drops they're going to get later, and can potentially change the rupee route a little bit. Okay, Waffle got a blue and a green, which means his next drop is going to be a blue, and he'll be able to get that either on the way to Eastern Palace or during Eastern Palace. If it's in Eastern Palace, he'll probably, well, okay, he got it there, never mind. So his next drop is going to be a red. He's not going to want to waste that on the way to Eastern Palace. He's going to want to try to not kill any Octoroks on the way to Eastern Palace, because then he'll have a harder time picking up the red drop. But if he gets it in Eastern Palace, he'll be able to pick it up with a more insignificant time loss to get it. MaltZi, I don't think he got any drops. I didn't see any anyway. See if these players get the Sanctuary Heart. The first optional safety item of the game is this chest right here. Increase their heart by 33%, but also gives them a full heal if anything bad happens in escape. That's probably more important at this point, is the free heal than the actual additional heart max. And it looks like they're both going to the east, so I think they're both going to Eastern Palace. Our very attentive chatters are observing that, reminding me that MaltZi did get one blue drop. That is good to know. Hopefully MaltZi is paying more attention to his own game than I am. There's the red drop. He is going to boomerang it. Okay. I'm going to say I agree with that choice. From the position he was in, he could have boomeranged that Octorok to get it out of his way instead of slashing it, and not have to turn around and boomerang, but the rupee did drop in a fine place where he didn't have to worry about any collisions from the boomerang with any terrain that would have stopped him from capturing that rupee. To get past this first Armo statue, there's a couple of options. Boomerang from above is a very consistent and consistently fast way to do it. All right, both entering Eastern Palace a few seconds apart from each other. Come through the bowling alley. You hope for good RNG here. You don't want the full zigzag like MaltZi got there. That's about as bad as it could go, but worst will be to actually take damage from one of the cannonballs, so at least he handled that correctly. See how Waffle handles these invisible Stalfos. Looks good to me. If you do get a magic drop in this room, it is standard to try to collect it with your boomerang. And the reason for that is because throwing the boomerang only costs about 12 or 13 frames, or 14 maybe even, but the magic refill after you kill Armos takes 16 frames less for every magic pickup that you get. So it ends up being a net gain of a couple or a few frames, as long as you don't mess up your movement at all by throwing the boomerang. Waffle doesn't really have to worry about rupees anymore. That Popo that they kill in this square room here is a great place to pick up a drop, or at least push the prize pack forward. So MaltZi will get that blue rupee that we just saw there for free, and then he'll have a red coming up, and that'll be all that he'll need if he's able to get that. Small variance that we saw here was Waffle picked up a optional arrow pot, 5 arrows there. When you don't pick that up, you're actually gambling that you're going to get drops from Igor's later. Good big key skip there for Waffle. MaltZi coming into the same room. Looks good for him too. 1.5 hearts lost is ideal. Two arrow pots that Waffle picks up there are not typically considered to be optional. They're very quick to get. Pretty much any knowledgeable player will pick those up. Doing this Igor room is much easier with the lights on than with the lights out. You can ask most randomizer players how difficult this room is with the lights out. MaltZi going down to 1 heart there. See if he decides to pick up an additional one here early to play it safe. He's confident going forward from here. Ooh, Waffle got ambushed there, but handled it well. Doesn't have a heart. There is a heart in the next room. He'll opt to pick that up just in case there's any funny business coming forward here. Waffle coming into Armos, doing a very common and easy and fast quick kill here. Executing it very well. Looks like MaltZi did actually win the gamble that he needed to, but he picked up extra arrows anyway. Doing the same strategy as Waffle here. Looks like he's executing it just as well. Both finishing up Eastern Palace under 11 minutes. A very good benchmark. Now for anybody that actually likes to watch players move fast in speed runs, we're going to see the Pegasus shoes offered by Sahasrahla in exchange for the green pendants. Oh yeah, I miscounted, you're right. Again, I'm being corrected by Scrivo in chat. I miscounted the arrows. No, he did actually lose the gamble and he had to pick up 2 arrow pots before Armos. The way that'll work is, if you don't get the gamble and you go over to pick up a pot, the 2 pots are right next to each other, so it's not much of a time loss to just pick up both instead of just one, and that way he won't have to pick up an additional one later for an additional cost. First Japanese 1.0 glitch we see is super speed coming out of Sahasrahla's house. It's activated by doing a little trick on the stairs themselves. Well, technically it's exiting the stairs that actually activates the speed. The glitch state is gained by the spin glitch, and in combination you get a nice speed boost. I remember the first time I ever did the super speed glitch, I actually misunderstood the explanation for how it worked and got it right first try by accident and could never do it again. The super speed glitch throughout the run, between spin speed and hook speeds, another way to activate it, can save, I think, about 20 or over 20 seconds actually. But there's several that are optional, that they have to be done and executed very well in order to save much or any time at all, or to not lose time. Some of them have a very high cost potentially for failure, so we probably won't see both players doing every single optional one. It will be neat to see which ones they choose to do based on which risks they think are worth it. As far as that gamble goes, it's a little interesting because it's true there's a 1 in 8 chance that you'll get no drop, but there's also a 1 in 8 chance that you'll get 2 arrow drops. And if you do get the backup arrows, then that puts you, if you do the normal arrow route and use arrows in the normal places, you'll actually, you'll go from 22 to 30, which means there's kind of an overfill and you lose 2 of the arrows that you get from drops. It's a minor thing, but in RTA, I would say it's better to gamble most of the time. In a race, however, I'd say doing what's more consistent is probably ideal. But that's purely based on preference. All I can do is explain the pros and cons, and I have to let players make their own decisions for themselves. MaltZi did have a little trouble in the overworld. Let's put him a little farther behind here. Waffle's entering the Desert Palace. Several arrow pickups here will be more than enough for the Lamola's boss fight. There's not a lot of consequential RNG or difficult tricks throughout this entire dungeon. It's mostly about optimizing the dash movement, which is a nice, it's kind of a nice transition. You know, you go from optimizing walking movement to optimizing dash movement without a lot of interference. So the game kind of flows and develops in mechanics very cleanly, I think, in this speedrun. It's one of the things I do like about it a lot. One of the few places that can have consequential RNG, however, is this cannonball room that Waffle's coming into right now. If he has to stop his dash and redash, that loses about a second. He got good RNG though. The boss of this dungeon, however, is the exact opposite of the dungeon itself and is highly consequential RNG. It's one of the most difficult boss fights to do consistently, if not the most difficult in the entire run. Good RNG for MaltZi as well. When you are able to dash all the way to the chest, you know that you can always dash south from the chest without ever having to stop and check the RNG pattern afterwards. It's a nice thing to know. Waffle dashing over that quicksand there. Might look a little risky dashing over that sand pit, but it doesn't actually develop a hitbox that can suck you in for a second after the the animation starts. Wow, Waffle, that's one of the risky super speeds that I mentioned there. If you touch that ledge at all, even for one frame, you'll jump off. So he had to adjust himself a little bit there to make sure he didn't fall off. I think as a visual cue for that sandpit dash, as long as you start the dash before Link's sprite goes below the hearts on the HUD there, you should know it's safe. Waffle picking up a little more rupees. He doesn't really need any more, but if you were to get 2 more by coincidence, he could skip a red rupee from one of the rupee trees later and save a little time that way. But at this point, he's not going to be going out of his way to pick up any more rupee drops. But if that happens just by luck, then he'll be able to make that optimization as well. MaltZi is good on arrows now and rupees as well. He's been able to pick up enough of both, so he doesn't have to worry about that either. Coming into Lamolas is Waffle. Let's see how the RNG and the execution match up here. A few hits on the first phase. I think one of them was left with full HP, which you don't really want. You want to try to distribute damage well, because you end up having to chase down one for a couple of extra cycles, which I think he still has one with no damage on it at all. Okay, not anymore. Really good cycle there at the end. Should be able to clean this up very quickly. Might just be 1 slash if he's counting damage. Ooh, short hop. Short hop terminated that plan. MaltZi coming in here. Also getting a few hits per cycle. The worst feeling in the world is getting no hits on an entire cycle. Ideally, you want to try to use just arrows if you can, but I think there's plenty of situations where using slashes is preferable. That slash used there to kill that worm was great. Either he was counting the HP and knew there was going to be a kill, but more importantly even than that, it was coming at him, and if he shot an arrow, it probably would have hit him, but by slashing it, it knocked him back and was actually a much safer choice in that specific situation. And those are the kind of situations where I'd say slashing is preferable to using arrows primarily. All right, and they ended up coming out of the fight with the exact same amount of rupees and arrows. Waffle's going to be doing fake flippers here. Potentially risky trick where you swim without having flippers by entering the screen transition as soon as you touch the water, using the bush to set you up there. The geometry of the game just happens to work out perfectly, and moving diagonal from that position just happens to line you up with exactly where you want to jump in the water. Call that a fun coincidence, or maybe they knew when they designed the game. I'm sure by now you all know what the risk is for fake flippers. There's a potential chance to lock up your game if you take damage while in the fake flipper state on any screen other than the one where you originally jumped into the water. Both players getting through it safely. That's just one more crisis averted in this speed run. Waffle's coming out onto Death Mountain. Let's see if Death Mountain is going to earn its name today. There's a lot of RNG on this mountain. Some of it is manageable, and unfortunately, some of it actually is completely out of your control, and you just have to take it. Waffle is famous for having a little trouble on a different part of Death Mountain. There's a part of the mountain that we refer to as the Waffle House. Hopefully he doesn't have the same trouble later. That part of the run comes later on the way to Turtle Rock. But yeah, really friendly mountain for him here. He even got the despawn dead rock in front of Tower of Hera, or the non-spawn dead rock. Very friendly for him. Tower of Hera is the last of the 3 pendant dungeons that they need to complete in order to get the Master Sword. To be able to defeat Aghanim, well, to be able to access Aghanim, you can actually defeat him with the level 1 sword, but without glitches, you're not really supposed to know that. Waffle looks like he's setting up a boomerang dash. There's one of a few item dashes that we'll see in the run. Another glitch exclusive to the Japanese 1.0 version of the game. Getting a first try there. The idea of the time save there is that this room is on a strict countdown no matter what you do, which means any actions taken in this room don't actually lose you any time. So by hitting the switch in this room instead of in the next room, where it would technically lose time, you're able to save yourself however long it takes to throw that boomerang and a couple frames of walking. More importantly maybe than that is it gives you a lot of peace and rest in that room. You don't have to think about anything. Just kind of stand there for a while. And I guess the swag is important for some people too, but I don't know about that. I don't know anything about swag. MaltZi did lose a couple hearts before coming into Hera. He's not really in too much danger now, but it is not a dungeon that you want to come into with too many hearts down. There is one intentional damage boost to bomb jump in this dungeon, and of course a very risky boss fight. Well, if it's coming up on that bomb jump, I think the style of this jump he's going to do is one that's often referred to as the waffle bomb jump. And it looks something like that. We have friendly Kadangos at the end there. Those Kadangos can try to block you either with fire or by trying to knock you out of your dash while you're charging it. Nothing bad happened there. Good beetles from MaltZi while Waffle is coming into the Moldorm fight. This fight is completely random, though there is a bit of a cycled pattern. He tends to alternate between moving in arched movements and straight movements and movements directed at the player. Not necessarily in that order, though. So with that knowledge, you can develop some strategy or some predictability to the fight. There's a lot of approaches to it. Waffle did play it safe there by going for some pokes. When Moldorm's head knocks you into a pit with your sword out, he cannot knock you off the platform as long as you're holding the direction against the pit. And Waffle took advantage of that mechanic in order to play it safe there. MaltZi did get some bad RNG from the Kadangos, but he knew how to clip through that rail in order to dodge that fire, so it didn't actually block him or stop him for long. And now he'll be entering the Moldorm fight. 2.5 hearts. Not the scariest of situations, but he does want to be a little bit careful at least. Getting rejected a couple times here. When that happens, if you see that Moldorm is gonna knock his head against that wall, one thing you can do is actually wait until right as he hits his head against the wall and then start charging the dash. Because his tail will always be wherever his head just was, the amount of time that it takes you to jump off after doing that is just enough time for the tail to be where your sword's hitbox is instead of his head, and you're able to get a free hit instead of getting knocked back. Successful fight for MaltZi there. It was a little scary at a few places. Little rough start there because Moldorm was rejecting him. Waffle is now doing the rupee route. Pulls the first tree to reset a couple of counters. The game does keep 2 counters, for one for enemies that you've killed and one for damage that you've taken. Both of those are reset when you pull on a tree. And where those counters lie determines what rupees you'll get from a later tree. And they're going to manipulate that so that they can get blues from the first tree and reds from the second tree. Those counters are only 1 byte each, and they will roll over back to 0 if they exceed 255. So it is actually possible, by very, very strange coincidence and luck, to get incorrect rupees from the first tree. But it is extremely rare, and would probably involve some incorrectly originated RAM when the run starts, because I don't know if there's more than 255 kills in this run to this point. I'm going to say there's probably not. So they need to take no damage after pulling the first tree and kill 4 or more enemies. with the amount of rupees that Waffle has. I did mention it earlier, but he had a potential of being able to skip one of the red rupees there. And that's what we saw him do there. Otherwise, you normally do need to get all 4. Ooh, taking damage after the rupee route. Getting hearts drops, so he's going to have sword beams going into Aghanim's tower, which is nice. Being low on hearts, I don't think he's going to be too worried about dying or anything, but there are a couple of strategies which do benefit from having sword beams and having full hearts going into the dungeon, including the first strategy that you execute in the run, or sorry, in the dungeon itself, which is to kill the 2 ball and chain guards. All right, I don't know if any of you, when you were kids, if after getting this cutscene, you actually thought you would get to the sanctuary fast enough to save Zelda before the guards took you. I'm pretty sure it's impossible, because I did try quite a few times. I was never successful. Let's see Waffle. As I mentioned, using those sword beams here to get a quick kill on these guards. MaltZi also able to skip 1 red rupee, picked up the mushroom, so we probably will be getting the magic powder later as another optional safety item, or possibly using the fake powder glitch if he doesn't actually want to commit to the full powder. The fake powder glitch only really benefits you in a few places, whereas the real powder can benefit you in many more places. But for more confident players who don't feel like they need that safety, I want to take a little bit more of a risk. It's kind of like a half safety. They may opt to try to do that. Aghanim's Tower is a completely linear dungeon. When you're doing this casually, there isn't one decision you ever have to make or anything you ever have to find. Every single room has 1 entrance and 1 exit. You just go straight through it. It's pretty much one big gauntlet, and a lot of the rooms do have very difficult strategies. A little bit of RNG that's consequential, but they're finite enough patterns that they can be mitigated or handled with quality practice. A game mechanic that Waffle took advantage of there was alerting those guards to make them run towards him by clanking the boomerang against the wall. It is an important part of that strategy. Like a good dungeon for him so far. I'm a little afraid to say it for risk of jinxing him in this room. But a good Aghanim's Tower. We're not the only people who see that. Aghanim also sees that, and he may have something to say about that too. MaltZi looks like he's having a good tower too. Was able to maintain beams coming in, but as did Waffle, he also lost a half a heart somewhere in the middle. MaltZi used 2 arrows on one of those guards and just a sword for the other. That was a fine choice since the guard did end up near the door. If the guard was farther away, maybe he would have wanted to use 2 arrows to kill him. But by using the sword there, he was close enough that he didn't really have to chase him down or anything. He was able to save 2 arrows in that room. And arrows are a very valuable commodity in this run. So that was an interesting thing to see. Waffle is actually a little low on arrows. He did use all the arrows. Well, I shouldn't say all the arrows. There are a lot of optional arrow strategies you can do in Aghanim's Tower, depending on some RNG or some situation that you find yourself in. But he did use all the standard ones. Picked up the 5 arrow pot there. He's at exactly 6, which is a very low number to be having going into Palace of Darkness. If he wastes any, you might have to pick up extras there. And the extras in Palace of Darkness are all very slow options, so he's not going to want to do that. MaltZi going in there with 10, he's going to be much more comfortable in that regard. 110 rupees is the minimum that you want to have coming out of here. They both were fine on the rupee route, so they're good in that regard as well. I don't usually pay much attention to the Aghanim fight, so I don't know how many blue balls he got there. But I think it was more than 0. Now, coming into the Dark World, the game does take a pretty significant difficulty increase. right on this first screen, there's already enemies that can take 3 hearts from your life from a hit to the body, the Snapdragons that is. And you're going to be meeting a lot of enemies that can do just as much damage very early on. The dungeon itself is more difficult, not just from like a casual standpoint, but the speedrunning tricks and the potential devastation in the run can be quite high as well. And that high knocks on that screen that Waffle was just on throws that first bomb to the east. He has the potential to throw a second bomb to the east, and if that happens, it'll actually knock you out of your dash if you try to do a precise dash. You can try to dash and just hope that he doesn't do that, or maybe dash a little bit lower or do a double dash or something to affect the timing so that it doesn't affect you. Waffle just went for it. I don't know if he just wanted to gamble or if he didn't care about the risk. Cannot take any damage while you have Kiki the Monkey. Waffle got the worst RNG you can get there, but because he had the boomerang equipped already, instead of switching to the mirror early, like some players do, as we actually saw MaltZi do, he was able to use that to help to mitigate the potential risk of that pattern. It was still a little scary because he had to walk between 2 arrows from that Moblin, and taking any damage would lose Kiki, and he'd actually need 10 more rupees, which he does not have, and that would be very bad if that did happen. Palace of Darkness is going to be a good place to stock up on bombs. You're going to get most of the bombs that you need for the rest of the run in this dungeon. Also having a little trouble with his super speed glitch here. On wide stairs like that, you actually gain a pretty significant speed increase by moving diagonal on the stairs when the glitch is activated. You saw him moving on the stairs to see if he had it activated instead of walking off of the stairs. On narrow stairs where you don't have any room to move left or right or diagonal, you have to walk off the stairs to see if you activated the glitch properly. So he was able to at least identify the times when he failed more quickly, more efficiently that way, and know that he had to try again. Waffle getting the big key here in Palace of Darkness, and he'll be heading to the hammer jump, the second bomb jump of the run, while MaltZi is entering the dungeon. He had no trouble getting Kiki to the entrance safely. This bomb jump is considered the most difficult, but not necessarily the most risky or the most dangerous, because it is very common to pause buffer it, and by using the pause menu to buffer movements, you're not only able to move precisely, but you're also delaying the in-game time, which delays the bomb countdown and also delays the bridge falling, which gives you more real time to check your pixel and to adjust as you need. See him doing that right now, opening and closing that menu a lot, not because he doesn't know what item he needs to have equipped, but because he wants to adjust his position a little bit. A few buffers there, but I don't think he's going to be unhappy with that. He'll be spending 1 arrow on a switch soon. This is the one that he needs to hit first try. It's probably the most likely one for a player to miss by trying to go too fast. Looks good. Only 1 heart down. There's 3 hearts in this statue room. If you need to fill all the way back up, if you happen to take a couple extra hits during the dungeon, it's still possible to get back to full hearts here, which is nice. The risk of dying is kind of high at the end of Palace of Darkness, but the sword beams are also useful for some strategies. He's going to spend 4 of his arrows here. Very well executed room there. This is where you want to use sword beams on the switch. Without sword beams, you have to waste an extra arrow. And as I said, he needed to not make any mistakes on his arrows in this dungeon because he needed every single one in order to be able to hit that statue and to proceed through the dungeon. Also coming into the hammer jump. Full hearts coming in, so he hasn't had a rough dungeon here at all. Getting that fairy drop, that might not seem like a bad thing at first glance, but because of the way the prize packs work and the way drops work, that does mean that he's much less likely to get one in Turtle Rock, and he's definitely not going to get one early in Turtle Rock. Waffle got some strange flips on the turtles there, but the strategy still worked. Sometimes when the turtles flip in unexpected directions, the strategy may not work exactly like it's supposed to, but in that case it still did. And he's coming into Helmasaur, the boss of this dungeon. This guy does 2 hearts of damage with all of his hits, so collecting the Sanctuary Heart puts you at an odd number of hearts, which means you can take 1 additional hit. As an optional safety, you can choose to hold your sword out to protect yourself from charges from Helmasaur. Waffle is opting not to do that. He's confident enough doing it this way. Holding the sword out in the second phase does make hitting with a hammer a little easier, and the hammer does do a lot more damage. That was a very well executed fight. He didn't get any really terrifying patterns there. He could have potentially gotten a fireball in the second phase that he did not get. Either way, it was still executed well. Good mimics from MaltZi as well. Much more comfortable in arrows, though, is he. Seems Waffle picked up 1 additional bomb in this dungeon. There are a few, well, I guess there's a couple optional bomb pickups in this dungeon. The one at the hammer jump is kind of risky because it does give you less time to set up the jump. So only players that are very confident with their hammer jump will likely go for that. That is okay, though, because there are plenty of other options for a bomb pickup before they need to have that additional one. I'm also got the unusual pattern here in the turtle room. The turtle's code is actually glitched in 2 different ways. One way is they're actually supposed to move in random directions sometimes and move towards the player sometimes, but they actually are bugged in a way where they always move towards the player. But then there's another bug in their directional code that causes them to sometimes move south when they're supposed to move north. And I actually am not sure what the cause of that is, but it's clearly observable. And when it happens in that room, there's really not much you can do from it about it. With the regular strategy is pretty much just going to fail, and you have to recover. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. MaltZi using his sword for safety, but after getting hit once and losing his sword, he decides to just go for the hammer instead of slashing it again. All slashes on the second phase is a much safer way to do it. Optimally, it is a little bit slower, but it is much safer. And depending on how the pattern of the fight ends up, Helmasaur does have a rhythm to him where he kind of moves 3 times and then does an attack. If you get all the hammers done just right, you kind of start the second phase right as he's doing an attack, so you know he's going to be stationary for a while, and you're able to get the hammers that way. If the rhythm of the fight is off, however, and you know he's going to give movements immediately when the second phase starts, it's not a bad idea to just start with the slashes, because you know you're not going to be able to get safe hammers. You can take risky hammers if you want, but that is, of course, a risk. After the first dungeon in the Dark World, the second dungeon they do is the 4th dungeon. They go from Palace of Darkness to Thieves' Town. They do have all the items that they need to get into and complete this dungeon completely, so it's a fine choice. This does put the flute right in their path on the way to town. The flute is an item that's going to speed up overworld travel, even more than the boots do, because it creates very large shortcuts for them. And they're also able to get the Tempered Sword, the level 3 sword, immediately after this dungeon, which makes the rest of the game a lot easier and also a lot of combat encounters a lot faster. On a few of these screens, there's things that we like to call lotteries, and if you win the lottery, in this case, it's not a good thing. The very rare bad luck. You can get damaged by a few enemies, and there's not really much you can do about it. MaltZi did get hit by a bird there. That's going to be okay for him, because he is going to get the powder. And when you collect the powder, which is going to be before he goes into the next dungeon, be able to get a full heal from the witch. Or alternatively, and potentially a little bit faster, he can bonk into a tree and collect some apples along the way to the 4th dungeon. This overworld section is awesome when we get to see a couple hammer dashes. Another very cool use of the item dash. It's like Waffle wanted to take a little detour there, but then remembered he had a job to do here. Having a little trouble opening up that dungeon too. You want to try to open up that dungeon as far left as you can, because when you get rolled back from it, if you bump the corner of that hedge there, that little wall, it actually causes you to get rolled back a shorter distance, and you can get into the dungeon faster. Unfortunately, if you try to do that too precisely and too far to the left, you can actually miss the grate entirely. MaltZi taking a little more damage on this overworld. Don't think that's going to be too much of a problem for him, though. I am of the opinion that Thieves' Town is one of the most consistent dungeons in the whole run, with the exception of one room, appropriately named Hellway. Hopefully I'm allowed to say that on this channel. Can have some very consequential RNG. There's a couple other small things that you might have to react to, but I think it's all pretty manageable. What Waffle would want to do here is do a precise dash up the middle. Even if he got the pixel-perfect dash there, the RNG would not have allowed him to do it. But he was able to find a path and thread the needle and get through there quickly enough. And yeah, it looks like MaltZi healed himself up there. Doesn't look like he went for that powder, huh? So if he is going to want to use that mushroom to his advantage to get a heal from an anti-fairy or a bunny beam, he is going to have to use the fake powder glitch. He will only be able to do that after he gets the Cane of Samaria. But the two, well, the few most optimal times to do it after that point, or in the whole run, I guess I should say, are after that point. So we'll see where he opts to do that. He was able to get full hearts coming into this dungeon, though, even without going to the witch's assistant to get a little health there. There's a few dungeons in this game that have non-traditional boss encounters. Moldorm is one of them. It's the only boss room that's a full 4-tile screen. And it's also the only one that you can exit the fight without using any glitches, usually by accident, but maybe on purpose for some reason. Thieves' Town is another one with a strange situation where you actually have to collect the boss in disguise and then bring it to the boss room to start the fight. This conveyor toilet room in Thieves' Town that Waffle's going into. Oh, good Hellway there from MaltZi. Did it exactly right. I call this room the conveyor toilet. There's a Waffle strat in that room that Waffle did try. Unfortunately, he didn't show it off well enough for the endorsement of his name. Blind is a completely scripted fight, as I'm sure you've heard people mention many times in this tournament. If it's executed correctly, it should play out exactly the same every time. Generally, in my opinion, as long as the first 2 phases go on script, you can improvise on the 3rd phase and not have too much trouble. Yeah, as you can see there, 3rd phase went wrong, but it wasn't too bad. He had enough hearts going into it that taking a little damage wasn't really a problem, and was able to finish that fight off without losing too much time either. The first time through the toilet room, there's an optional bomb in this corner pot that MaltZi's picking up there. Waffle came out of Palace of Darkness with 1 additional bomb relative to MaltZi, so he did not need to pick that up. I had to get a drop there, so that's lucky. I think, if you know the drop is coming, like if some way you could actually predict that, you would not get that pot. But getting both is not a bad thing either. It's not going to put him at too high of an amount of bombs, which with some optimizations, I know that might sound a little silly, but there is a way that you can have too many bombs and can throw off a few very specific like one specific strategy. Okay, maybe 2. But yeah, it's not too big of a deal, even if you do have too many. It's better to have something that you don't need than not have something that you do need. MaltZi's going to be a little bit low on hearts coming into blind. May opt to pick up 1 additional heart before the boss fight. Have 5 going into it. With the green rupee drop there, the next drop from that prize pack would be a heart, if you wanted to maybe gamble on getting a heart drop from one of those Stalfos. That's a very obscure thing, though. I don't think most people would even consider that. But in the variety prize pack, the heart drops always do come after green rupees. So if you are down hearts and you're paying attention to that prize pack, you know that you have a potential to get one from an enemy in that pack immediately following. His fight is off script even on the 2nd phase, but he's not taking any damage so far. Wow, he actually got off script early and didn't take any damage. That's actually pretty impressive. I'm sure his heart rate increased a little bit during that fight, but he got through it okay. Survived. to live another day. Now Waffle is getting his upgraded sword. This sword does take a lot of time to get, so you might think that there's a possibility that it could be faster to skip this sword. Unfortunately, the amount of time that this sword saves, I shouldn't say unfortunately actually, it's actually really fortunate that the easier strat is faster. Maybe unfortunately for spectators, because maybe they like to see some Master Sword runs. But it does save a lot of time, particularly on the Ganon fight, but in a few other places it does save a noteworthy amount of time as well. So it is worth it to get it, always. After Thief's Town is also the rest of the Rupee route. The hut that MaltZi is bombing open right now is the first 300, and the one that Waffle is exiting from now is the other 300. That'll be enough for them to get the flippers. They only need 10 rupees to upgrade their sword. That's covered by the first 300 and 500 for the flippers a bit later. Now Waffle is coming into Skull Woods. This is the only dungeon that really has hazards on the overworld in between sections of the dungeon, which means if you have a bad time, you're losing a lot of hearts, and the risk of dying presents itself in the overworld. The time lost from that is very bad, because you'll have to respawn on the pyramid and come all the way back to the dungeon from there, just to continue it. It is a very short dungeon in the speed run. It's kind of confusing the first time you do it, but when you know exactly where to go and what to do, it's very direct and very short. A little bit of backtracking here, coming back to the big chest. There's also going to be another bomb jump here. Another one of the easy ones. There's the easy setups, and the penalty for fail in this one is also not too significant. Intelligently, he used his sword beams there to kill that Moldorm before letting the bomb take him, so that he didn't have to worry about it doing damage to him or blocking him on his way to or from the chest. So that was a good move there. Good execution in the few difficult rooms of Skullwood so far for Waffle. Using the menu to judge the position of his dash there before walking up so he doesn't accidentally walk into the spike. Some players like to just try to aim for that little spot there, but using the menu gives it at least a chance to double check. Gives you a chance to adjust yourself if you're not on the correct position. You may see several of those kinds of menus throughout the run. We generally call that pause buffering. Waffle going for the optimal torch room here. A well-executed room from him. Those mummies will knock 2 hearts from your health if they hit you, so you really don't want to mess up too much in that room. Going into Mothula, a boss that has the potential to be very fast or very slow, depending partly on RNG and partly on your execution. You want to start the fight off by getting a double hit by dashing into this block. After that, you just hope it doesn't hug the top spikes too much. If he does, you go for poke dashes, as you saw Waffle do there. Getting the last hit after he comes off the spikes there at the end. So that was a pretty fast fight, but there were a couple of spots there in the middle where he did lose the potential to hit him, either by doing a slash into the spike when he probably could have set up a poke dash, or by failing to set up the poke dash if that's what he was trying to do. Sometimes when you try to set up a poke dash, you accidentally hit Mothula because you're standing so close to him. MaltZi taking some damage on the overworld there. In that little 3x3 set of bushes, there's actually a heart in the top, or not a heart. There's a potential for a heart or a fairy drop in the top left bush. It's a 1 in 8 chance for a heart, a fairy, or a green rupee, and a 5 in 8 chance for nothing. But if you are losing hearts in the overworld, it might not be a bad idea to at least check that and see if you can maybe get a heart or a fairy. Choosing instead to go for a death warp here, that's going to recover several of his hearts. And he can proceed to the second part of the dungeon. Next dungeon up for Waffle is the Ice Palace. He's going from, in the intended dungeon order, he's going from dungeon 3 to dungeon 5. There's definitely a difficulty increase between these 2 dungeons. Before that, he has to run one quick errand. He's going to have to get the flippers from King Zora. There's a little bit of potentially bad RNG one of those lotteries that I mentioned earlier. On the way to the flippers, they can take 2 hearts off from Waffle before he gets to Ice Palace. Wouldn't be so good if it happens. MaltZi playing the mummy torch room a little bit more safely by killing all the mummies. You still have enough magic to do that and light all the torches, so if you want to play it safe and do that, there's really not much of a problem with doing that. Oh, it looked like it wanted the heart, but those enemies said no. Not going back for it a second time. Sometimes you go for that heart, you get surrounded and you end up losing more hearts than you're gaining. MaltZi and the MaltZi fight now. Going for the bonk strat as well. Getting pretty good RNG there. It's not good when MaltZi on the outside like that. That was a fast charge. When you throw the fire rod at MaltZi, sometimes he charges down really fast. Unfortunately, the conveyor pulled him right into MaltZi as that happened. So going back into this fight after dying, the biggest problem here is that he is going to be low on magic going into the torch room. There's a couple magic pots in there, and a fairly high chance of getting magic from the mummies if you kill them. They're slow to kill with the sword, and if you have to use the fire rod to kill them, then you're spending magic to potentially gain magic, and that can be a little risky. He is able to get enough magic here, though, plus the 2 magic pots in this room. Gonna go for a drop, maybe. Alternatively, he could use the lantern here to light the first 2 or 3 torches, and then just use the fire rod for the last 1 or 2. But he's gonna go ahead and kill everything and try to get as many drops as he can. Yeah, in fact, even with all the magic that he gained, he is still going to use the lantern, or use the fire rod to hit 2 torches. That's a nice option too. He's going to save a lot of magic now, so he has more uses of the fire rod on the MaltZi fight. So if he does get a bad pattern, he'll be able to handle it a little better, potentially, with that. Waffle getting blocked by that Zora, it's a little bittersweet, because you do have to spend a little time to kill it, but it does have a 100% chance to drop a bomb. So that gives him 1 more bomb and a little more comfort on the bomb route there. I'm also using the fire rod more on this fight this time, finishing him off with a slash. Ooh, Waffle's skating around in the ice physics there a little bit. The ice physics in this game do not make a lot of sense. They're actually very hard to explain. They do take a lot of experience to really get used to them and to know how to use the momentum to your advantage. You really have to move between alternating diagonals. You really can't move laterally on ice and maintain momentum like that and change direction at all. So you saw him kind of try to make a shape out of only diagonal movements that ended up with him near to the door. He eventually got there after a few turns. Waffle will attempt to take advantage of a strange AI bug in the game, where having 1 Stalfos Knight knockdown will cause both of them to be vulnerable to bombs. A very cute trick there, executed well as well. Another cute trick here is to use a damage boost to align yourself with the spikes so you can dash perfectly through the center of that room. Dashing is nice because on conveyors, the speed loss from walking is way more significant than the speed loss from dashing if the conveyor is moving the opposite direction as you. Pretty good bomb jump there. He was a little slow setting himself up, so the fire bar was able to block him after the jump. Ideally, you do it fast enough so that that does not happen. He's confident enough to take a damage boost in this dungeon. He has had a lot of hearts. And the dungeon item of Ice Palace is the blue armor. It might be an okay safety option if it didn't take a million years to get. So you'll never, well, you'll very rarely see a player go for the blue mail. It's not unheard of, but it is pretty rare. MaltZi's taking advantage of another little bug in the game there. If you pick up an object and jump off a ledge, you actually regain your normal movement speed on the ground that you land on, instead of taking a speed loss from carrying an object. So he's able to move faster like that. Cold Stairs, potentially one of the most dangerous bosses in the run. The strategy Waffle is doing here is to spin all of them into the corner and do a double spin and 1 slash on each of them. After doing the double spin successfully, he was not able to get that slash right away. But they stayed close enough together. It took 3 slashes to kill all 3 of them. They didn't have to chase any of them down separate from each other. So he survived. Meanwhile, MaltZi is going to be spending 500 rupees on these flippers. A very high price item. As expensive as the level 2 shield. Another safety item that you're not going to be seeing players get very often in this run. And he will likely be making his way to Ice Palace next. There is a small potential route variation here, where instead of taking the Whirlpool directly to Ice Palace, it's also an option to flute to Link's house and do Swamp Palace first. It's a surprisingly small time loss to do that. It's unfortunate that you can't flute from inside of Zora's domain. You still have to leave it. Otherwise, it might actually be faster to just do that instead. Waffle is making his way to Swamp Palace after Ice. It's also potentially an option to get some of the items that you need to get for later in the game at different times in the game. The two specifically are the Ether Medallion and the Ice Rod. Some players will choose to get those before Swamp. I've seen some players do it before Ice Palace. You know, and that's not like some random thing that, you know, just some new players do. It's actually a perfectly viable option, and the time loss is minimal, and it can actually reduce the risk of collecting them before Misery Mire, a dungeon that you definitely want to go into with full hearts if you can. All right, MaltZi starting up Ice Palace. He came into it a heart down, got hit by 2 Zoras along the way. Oh, that's bad RNG for him there. He doesn't want to take a heart. I mean, even if you slashed it, you wouldn't even get through it. You would just take a heart of damage for nothing. So in this Stalfos Knight room here, there's actually a heart in the pot that you have to pick up anyway. So he's going to get himself to full hearts here, going into the conveyor room. Picking up an extra magic vial there just in case. Not able to get the dash through the middle. But was able to get beams in the room, which does let you kill the jellies safely and consistently, which is also a very important part of that room. Barely got that line up in time. I was right at the last moment. So Swamp Palace in the intended dungeon order is number 2. So you go 4, 3, then 5, then 2. So the difficulty of this dungeon decreases in regards to the strength of the enemies and the complexity of any of the puzzles that you have to do or anything like that. However, the RNG in this dungeon is very significant. It's not likely to kill you, but it is very likely to lose you a lot of time and frustrate you quite a bit, potentially. See Waffle getting harassed by that fire snake there. I think I've heard Scrivo refer to this dungeon as death by 1,000 paper cuts or something. I think that's a very fair metaphor. All right, MaltZi's going to be falling into the Cold Stare fight here. The Cold Stare puffs themselves can do 4 hearts of damage, and the Falling Ice does 2, so he's not at risk of dying from a small mistake. Well, he actually missed the first spin, but was able to get them into the corner afterwards. I know when I missed that first spin, the only option for me is to panic. Yeah, looks like he's handling this very well. Took a hit there. A little too aggressive at the end maybe, but yeah, was able to finish that up without dying. Let's say that's generally the most important thing. Let's see if Waffle will remember to hit the switch. He did. Seeing those pegs in the up position when you fall into that room. I don't know. Some people say it happens to everybody, but I know when it does happen to anybody, it's not something to get over for a long time. All right, the dungeon item of Swamp Palace is the Hookshot. A quite cool item. It stuns a lot of enemies and does also kill a lot of enemies in one hit. Also gives you invulnerability frames when you use it, and is helpful for a few movement optimizations. It is absolutely necessary to pick up the hook shot because you do need it to get over that gap there and also to kill the boss of this dungeon. In Swamp Palace, there are 2 arrow pickups and 2 bomb pickups. You want to exit this dungeon with a minimum of 2 bombs. As far as arrows go, I wouldn't say that there's really an absolute minimum because there are at least options to get backups later. So you won't ever be like totally lost if you have 2 low arrows coming out of here. But yeah, you want to figure you're going to use a minimum of 8 on Vitreous, but probably more than that. And after that, you want to have a minimum of 13 for a free 5 in Ganon's Tower, and then 18 for Ice Armos. So the bare minimum, I guess, in that regard will be 21, but a little more than that is what I'd say. If I was coming in here with maybe even 20, I might still pick up an additional arrow pot. Or I would recommend that, I should say. Waffle going for the quick kill here. Killing these pups without having to slash his sword on each one. Did get knocked out of his sword out position. He's going to get a single cycle with 0 movements after the first hurricane cycle. And then using 2 spins in the second phase there. In the first phase, the best you can do is get 0 cycles. Argus will move 3 times in between each cycle. So you will get 3 movements and 0 cycles at best. And then the second best will be 1 cycle and 0 movements. But even 1 movement after the second or after the first cycle is not a terrible time loss compared to 0 movements. But that's just how we measure the fight. In these parts of the Swamp Palace where you have to fill up these, I don't know what you call them, these deluges, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but you can actually reduce lag a little bit by having less sprites on screen. But you can also increase lag by having more sprites on screen. And you can potentially do that by pushing the switch and then slashing your sword to try to kill a Stalfos and maybe throwing a sword beam. If one of the Stalfos throws a bone, that can also increase lag. So those are things to look out for that can potentially lose you time. You really don't want to go out of your way to get a kill. You may get a kill before you drain some of them just by dashing through an enemy or just by the way things play out. But generally, you're going to be looking at ways to not lose additional time when you're letting those drain. All right, now after Swamp Palace is when Waffle is going to collect his Ether Medallion and the Ice Rod before going to Misery Mire. Death Mountain is dangerous, and you saw him lose 1 heart already. This is why some people choose to get at least the Ether Medallion at a different time in the run, because going into Misery Mire without full hearts can be a bad thing. However, there are a few opportunities to get a heart. He was aware of that one. The north, south, east, and west bushes, after you warp there, all have the potential to drop a heart or a fairy. It's a 1 in 8 chance for a heart or a fairy. So a 1 in 4 chance that you'll get something. And he was lucky enough to get that there. After the Ice Rod, you're going from dungeon number 2 to dungeon number 7. Another very large increase in difficulty and in risk. At this point, though, they have completed every other dungeon, so it's not like they're doing this dungeon early or anything. It's just a very stark contrast from the previous one that they have to complete. MaltZi making his way back to the backtracking section of this dungeon here. Going for a hammer dash there. Going to get his hook shot. And then he's going to get his revenge on Argus. I know sometimes when that bird is flying towards you as you're trying to open Misery Mire, it can be a little scary, but for the most part, if you're confident that he's not going to hit you, you can almost always get that ether cast before it hits you. Instead of playing it safe and slashing him or something. I know if I try to play it safe and slash him, I often end up getting hit by him. because it throws off the timing. It's a cool quick kill in this room that Waffle's in, and he executed it very well there. The main objective there is to kill all the Wizrobes before they have any chance to disappear. That is a cycle-based room, which means, of course, the objective is to finish it in as few cycles as possible. But ideally, you also mitigate the potential RNG time loss by killing one of the Popos early. That makes it a little harder to kill the Wizrobes as fast as you need to. But he was able to do both of those things successfully, and that's very nice. Last small key for MaltZi there in Swamp. We'll be coming into Argus here. These slugs in Misery Mire do a full 4 hearts of damage, so this is the first dungeon where you actually have to face enemies within the dungeon that can do that much damage without any armor upgrades. Looks like MaltZi's going to get a 1 cycle here, a couple movements, and it looks like he's going to use 2 slashes as well. In the second phase. Nice and easy kill there. One of the things we like to say is that for pretty good players, you can generally estimate that at the Torch cutscene in Misery Mire is approximately 20 minutes from the end of the run, which means we'd say that, assuming there's no catastrophes from this point, that Waffle is on 126 pace right now. But there's plenty of opportunities from catastrophes still, so don't get your hopes up just yet. Or don't get your hopes down if what you're interested in is catastrophes. Misery Mire does have the option to take a few intentional damage boosts, one of which is to dash through this spark here, as Waffle is choosing to do. One of the things that makes that risky is that the boss quick kill does also require you to take several hearts of damage. So if anything goes wrong, you take a few intentional hearts of damage, maybe a few unintentional ones, and you can end up at that fight in a very scary position. This is another room here. It's going to take 3, ideally. Hopefully not any more than that. While MaltZi is coming out of Swamp House, going to run his errands. I would guess that we'll see him do both Ether and Ice Rod at this point. It is the most common timing for both of them for most players. So taking advantage of the sword climb, by holding your sword out and doing a hook dash on stairs, you actually gain a lot of movement speed walking up the stairs. It looks really fast, but it's actually the same speed as walking with your sword out on normal ground, which looks really slow on normal ground, but he knows about those hearts as well. Both players getting the 1 in 8 chance to get a heart there to heal up, because they both took 1 heart on Death Mountain going towards Ether. That is Waffle's last bomb. Another terrible thing to do is to throw that bomb in the wrong direction. I know that's another thing that has happened to a lot of players, myself included. The cool thing about that is when you use that last bomb, you actually automatically switch to the Fire Rod, and you can use that to hit the switch there. It's technically not a saved full menu, because you do still have to menu to the bow for Vitreous, and you can just menu to the bow there, so it's the same amount of total menus, but you use 1 less arrow, and you move 1 less time in the menu, which is a nice few frames saved there as well. Oh, so Waffle is in an interesting place here. He could, he could have maybe gone for the 7-arrow Vitreous strat to end at 13 in order to have enough for Ice Arms without having to pick up an extra pot. But he did have to use that arrow to kill that last eyeball there. Trying to kill that with just his sword would have been really risky and probably a lot slower. So yeah, that was a little bit of a messed up quick kill. He did have plenty of hearts in case it went even worse than that. I think he got 1 lightning, which is not too bad. Ideally, you just get 0, so 1 additional isn't really terrible. Another very scary fight. A boss that can do 4 hearts of damage, coming out of it alive is the most important thing. So Waffle will be exiting this dungeon right about the same time that MaltZi is entering it. He'll be making his way to Turtle Rock. And this dungeon may be our first opportunity to see MaltZi use the fake powder glitch, because this is where he will be getting the Cane of Samaria, which does allow him to do that. Good thing to know about Wiz Robes is that they do have a very high chance to drop hearts. Every time you kill one of them with any attack other than a dash, they have a 50% chance to drop. There are 8 drops in the pack, and 6 out of 8 are hearts. So that gives them a theoretical probability of 1 in 8 chance to drop a heart. Wait, did I do that math right? Something like that. Though it's not technically that exact odds. If you're paying attention to the prize pack, you know if you're going to get a heart or not next. But if you're not paying attention to them, then you can use that as a theoretical statistic. Waffle did not get Waffle House this time. Looks like I played it pretty safe there, in fact. Slugs are another enemy that has a 100% chance to drop bombs, so if you are out of bombs, that's a great place to pick one up if you want to kill that guy. MaltZi looked like he did want to pick up that magic, but didn't. He's actually going to be fine if everything goes normal, which is not going completely normal. But even if he uses a little extra magic here, as long as he's able to get through this torch room, there is a full magic pickup right after the first big key door. It's not very far out of the way. That will give him more than enough to finish this dungeon. As Waffle is entering Turtle Rock, he is going to need to pick up a bomb. There is one there at the beginning of this dungeon. I think that's the best one to pick up. There are a few other options, though. The next room where you need a bomb actually has, I think, 4 bombs in it. So even if he doesn't pick up any more before then, he'll still have plenty to use there. He'll take advantage of this hook shot here, pull himself off that platform. There's not a lot of ways to leave those platforms, but using the hook shot is one of them. That's a way to speed up that puzzle in Turtle Rock significantly. A lot of speedrunners only learn how to do that room with the hook shot, and then if they find themselves in a position where they have to do that room without the hook shot, like a lot of people did when Randomizer was new, or in some puzzle races or even glitch runs, they end up having a lot of trouble figuring that out. All right, Pokies are a really strange enemy. Waffle got that fairy drop there. It wasn't too low on hearts, but it's still nice to get it, because he can use a sword beam for a few strategies in this dungeon, as long as he can maintain full hearts until that time. The thing about Pokies is the way they take damage is really unusual. If you do 2 spins, you can kill them. However, if you slash one first, or poke it, or hit it with a sword beam, it damages it in a way that 2 spins after that point will actually not kill it. And you'll actually have to do more hits total. It's a little strange, but that's how it works. So Waffle went ahead and picked up some extra arrows there, so the free pot in Ganon's Tower will be enough for him to kill Armos. I like that use of the sword beam there too, to knock that skull down so we can kill that Pokey farther south, which makes the key dash there a little bit easier. That's actually a really cool strategy in that room. Yeah, there's a couple rooms where you have to hit a switch, and using a combination of the sword beam and the Kinestamari is a really cool way to do it. The Crystal Roller room, as we call it, the next room where you have to hit a switch, you can do something similar. You set one block and then use the sword beam and then blast the block. And it's the fastest way to do that room as well. It saves magic as well, which is almost as important if you don't get a magic drop. So he should be getting one, or he already got one actually in the last room, but didn't pick it up because he did the key dash. MaltZi coming into Vitreous. Not enough hearts. He did not do the fake powder, so he doesn't have enough hearts to do the quick kill. He's going to be doing a combination of slashes, spins, and arrows. Unfortunately, one of those guys came and sideswiped him and took him out. Okay, Waffle's going to use beams only in this room. Another good option, because he didn't get the magic drop. Maybe he's playing even more safe on magic usage. But he did beat the roller, and the most important thing about that room is beating that is another room that I would call a cycle-based room, which means beating this specific cycle is the objective. There's a few different ways to do it with the sword beams or the cane or some combination of the two. And what you saw there from Waffle did work. Now Waffle's going to try to bypass a laser eyeball without any safety items to help him, like the cape or the Kinaburna or shield or anything using a little dash there. Nice, cute little strategy that takes advantage of the fact that the laser only has a hitbox right on the front of it, and also the way that the game realigns the player when he's partially overlapping an object as he dashes into it. And also picking up a bomb there. It looked like that was his plan from the start, was to do that strategy that automatically gains a bomb in that room, which means skipping the bomb at the beginning of this dungeon was probably intentional. He did pick up an 8-drop during the dungeon, which meant that was not necessary. But if that's the strategy he was planning to do anyway, then it's good to just stick with your plan in situations like that. But now he has 9 bombs, so I don't know what he's going to do with all those bombs. Trinex, in a way, almost feels like kind of a joke boss at the end of the run, since it comes right after Cold Stare and Vitreous, which are so scary on their own. With a few common quick kill strategies, it's a very easy way to get through the first 2 phases. Third phase can be a little bit scary because you have to stand right at Trinex as he's bearing down right at your face, but if you have confidence like Waffle did there, you can get a quick kill in the second phase as well. MaltZi's coming into Vitreous for the second try with a lot more hearts this time. He didn't actually use too many arrows the first time, which is a really good thing, because that means he doesn't have to worry about being too low this time for a quick kill. Unfortunately, oh man, he got hit trying to get back into the goo, and then as soon as he walked out, the closest eyeball to him charged right at him and took him out again. But he's going back for vengeance. At this point, he's angry. I wouldn't want to be Vitreous right now. So it looks like this last crystal that Waffle is picking up here has a different type of maiden in it. There's something unique about this one. I'm not quite sure what it is, but her dress looks a little fancier or something. This will be the last crystal he needs to open up Ganon's tower, which will be the last and most difficult dungeon of the game. The dungeon itself does not have as many very dangerous individual hazards as the previous couple dungeons did. Chain Chomps and Pokies and Slugs in the last 2 dungeons all do 4 hearts of damage. The laser eyes do as well, and a few enemies that do 3 hearts. Most of the things that they're going to meet in this dungeon are not as individually scary, but the challenges themselves are more difficult to optimize, which makes it much more difficult from a speedrunning perspective. It is definitely possible to get knocked around a few times and get your butt kicked in this dungeon, but for the most part, survivability isn't the worst thing in this dungeon, but speed is very difficult. Almost every room in this dungeon has some sort of special or too optimal trick that very few people might try to do. Just these teeny little optimizations that are everywhere in this dungeon. Some people will sacrifice consistency for speed, and some will sacrifice speed for consistency. What you do is up to you. Hookshotting up there. All right. I think third try is going to be the charm for MaltZi on Vitreous here. Better start already. Let me finish up these last 2 arrows. I think it should just be 1 arrow each, and then 8 for the big eyeball. And he's going to be toast. All right, Waffle will be coming into the first refight of this dungeon. In this dungeon, you have to basically refight all 4 of the Light World bosses with an added twist in each one. The first one is the Armos fight, with the change that you can, or that it's going to be on ice. That makes it a little more difficult. There's still a very clean quick kill that we may see from Waffle. Well, at least see him attempt it. Same idea as the first Armos fight. You want to cripple one of them early and then kill the crippled one last, in order to prevent it from enraging on you. Very well executed there. Needs to pick up a couple more arrows though. 10 in this chest will be as many as he needs for the rest of this dungeon. The entire right side of Ganon's tower is completely optional. The right side and the left side both converge at the same point, making this dungeon just a couple of big loopy-loops that all diverge. Then you can go upstairs after completing either one of them, as long as you have enough small keys, which luckily there are plenty of options for small keys in this dungeon. Nice mimic rooms from Waffle there. Those rooms can be tricky. The second one has more of a potential to get worse after it starts to go bad, because the BMOs don't let you have any leniency to really think or do what you want to do. So if you don't get the kills as fast as you need to get them, slow yourself down a little bit. Those BMOs are gonna provide a challenge for you. Makes the room more interesting, but not better for a speedrun. Now Waffle's coming into the gauntlet. One of the official strategy guides of this game refers to this as the Enemy Endurance Challenge. I think that's an appropriate name because you got to go through 5 rooms where the only thing to do is kill all the enemies in the room and proceed with fun things like BMOs on conveyors, spikes and ice and everything. A little bit of RNG can be pretty impactful in a few of these rooms, but in some of them the strategies are more consistent and patterns are more finite and manageable. Overall, that was pretty good. He probably took a little more damage than he wanted to. It wasn't too bad. Didn't waste any extra fire rod shots or anything, so we'll have enough magic for this fight. The La Mola's 2 fight to get a quick kill. That fireball doesn't really have much of an impact on this fight. When you see a player like Waffle complete it like that. MaltZi is entering Turtle Rock now. We do know from earlier, because he did get a fairy drop, that he is not going to get a fairy drop early in this dungeon. And with that knowledge, he may opt to not do the early damage boost through the roller and to save hearts by mirroring after collecting that small key. Or he might play it risky. There is a potential that he could get a fairy a little bit later in the dungeon anyway, if he gets pretty lucky with his drops. These torch rooms in Gaines Tower are a little scary, this first one in particular, because you come out of it with so little magic that any mistakes can cause problems, and there's not really a good place to pick up magic at that point. There are a few small pots in the room, but at that point, the risk is much higher for mistakes. The refill between the 2 rooms, though, does give you a lot more comfort going into the second room. And yeah, MaltZi did up to mirror to save hearts there. Waffle's going to get the last key in this room. There's 3 keys that you can choose to get, I guess. They're all kind of interchangeable. There's pros and cons to each of them, one of which obviously is speed. The one he did there is the second fastest, but when you get that key, you automatically get 1 heart and a full magic pickup, so that's good. Falling off at Moldorm, however, is not good. Landing on the spikes after you fall in this fight is always adding a little extra insult to your injury. And try again. Whoa, that dash was a little risky, actually. If he went through the head there, he might have got damaged. Dashing through the head of Moldorm is a little inconsistent. You don't always know if it's going to be safe or not. But that one would have probably been unsafe. Doesn't guarantee he would have got hit, but I wouldn't have done it. Also able to get the quick kill on that pokey there. It's probably the hardest one to get the quick kill in general, in my opinion. Now Waffle's going into the upgraded Aghanim fight. There's 3 Aghanims that you have to fight, but only 1 can take damage. The benefit of having 3 Aghanims to fight means there's a lot more projectiles in play that you can use to hurt him and speed the fight up compared to the original fight. The original fight, the minimum of 6 cycles, but this fight you can go as low as 2, and ideally you keep it in the 2 to 4 range, probably. It is a challenge of geometry and tennis, I guess. Combine those 2 things, you get Aghanim 2. Unfortunately, a beating down on Aghanim's corpse does not have any benefit later in the game. It's just a way to let out your rage at the guy. So Waffle will be going into the Ganon fight, the final boss of this game. It was a good RNG. This fight should be a little under 2 minutes after he lands on the pyramid. So it looks like he's still potentially on 126 pace, assuming he doesn't get bad RNG or mess the fight up. too badly. MaltZi is getting to near the end of Turtle Rock now. He still does have the option to use fake powder at the end of this dungeon. It does force you to run out of magic, which he doesn't really want to do, but at the point when you have to do it, there is a full magic pickup after that point. So it's not the worst thing in the world. Waffle did get a 1 cycle in the first two phases again, and they kind of blend together. You can't really tell where they're separated always until you're pretty familiar with the fight. But if he stays at the bottom for the entire first 2 phases, that's ideal. Third phase, all you gotta do is slash him once and hope that he lets you. If he doesn't, there's nothing you can really do about it. Call that the warps phase. There's a 50% chance on every warp. So the minimum is 0 and the maximum is technically infinity. Fourth phase, you need 12 spins. He already got 1 there. Snuck 1 in at the beginning of the 4th phase. Like the first torch before the second one goes out for the torch glitch. I'm sure everybody knows that by now. And ideally, you'll be getting triples on every light of the torch, other than the first one, because the first one you don't choose when the timing happens. The game chooses that for you. So if you get double timing, that's out of your control. MaltZi's doing try next from the bottom. Saw Waffle do it from the top. Just another variation. He's going to go for the quick kill in the second phase as well. Ooh, a little scary there. Got him though. The head is vulnerable there at the beginning of the second phase, but the body becomes vulnerable later. Waffle finishing up Ganon. Nice clean fight from Waffle there. Assuming he doesn't dash off the side of this platform, it looks like he's going to be finishing, yeah, with a high 126 there. Pretty solid run from him overall, I'd say. It's only about a minute off from his PB, and in any given race, staying within that close with some blue balls, which are obviously out of your control, that's a pretty well executed race there for him. MaltZi finishing up try next means he'll be going into Ganon's tower shortly after this. He's coming out of Turtle Rock with 2 bombs. Waffle came out with 9, but that was way more than he needed. Really only need 1 at this point. The room where you use a bomb in Ganon's tower, not only does it have multiple bombs in it, but you actually pick up 1 automatically just by doing the room. So you use 1 and fill it right back up in the same room. And then you only need, I think, just 1 more after that. So going into Ganon's tower with any is fine. Or with 0 is fine too. Also with 13, he's going to have the option to pick up only the guaranteed arrow pot before Armos, going with exactly 18, which means he won't be able to make any mistakes, or he might pick up 5 extra ones for about a 1-second time loss for a lot of safety in that fight, if that's what he prefers. Watching the credits after a vanilla run, you get to see Sahasrah's real name. I'm sure a lot of people who watch a lot of randomizer runs have no idea what his real name is, but now you know. Sahasrah is the name. Making his way through Ganon's tower, MaltZi is going to want to try to lose as few hearts as possible. I said before, it's not too dangerous of a dungeon. The risk of dying is real, but it's not the highest of all dungeons, in my opinion. But sword beams do help in at least 1 place. And of course, more hearts is always better than less hearts. Skipping that warp tile there with a bonk. When you dash against a wall that you're not, I think if you're more than, I want to say 7 or 8, maybe 9 pixels overlapped it, the game will realign you and push you on the outside of the wall, which is kind of neat that that works there. He's going to go for the extra arrows. So you're perfectly safe on this fight. And he will likely be trying the same or a very similar quick kill to what we saw Waffle do earlier. Looks like he's good. Just keep firing. I think MaltZi is spoiling the upcoming event that we're going to see. Yeah, looks like he's going to go for the red mail. That way he'll be much safer for the conclusion of this dungeon and the Ganon fight afterwards. This also means that his Ganon bats might be a little bit different than what we would call standard. That is based partly on the quality of the Armos 2 fight, the Armos refight, but really there's just a timer that goes on the entire time you're in that room, whether Armos is alive or not. And when I say room in this context, I mean there's like a full tile on the in-game map that actually includes 4 different rooms. And if you're in any of those 4 rooms, the counter continues to count. So if you're in the room picking up the big key and the arrow's there, and in the room with the stairs that lead up to the red mail, that timer continues. And if it exceeds a certain number, then it does change the Ganon bats from what we call standard. Now, if you're practicing Ganon with a save state and you're getting the exact same bat pattern every time, you're going to probably want to make sure it's the standard one if your dodges kind of depend on it being the same every time. And also make sure that your Armos 2 fight is good. And if you do get the red mail, then you might just want to practice Ganon with all different patterns, just so you can learn how to improvise and handle different patterns well. So MaltZi did fall there by accident, but he did take advantage of the invulnerability frames that you get from falling in a hole. They do last a very long time. In this case, it's long enough to get across the entire room without having to dodge any of those cannonballs the second time. He's making his way in the gauntlet. Nice job killing those Stalfos. Sometimes when you slash at a Stalfos, they dodge so expertly. You really gotta get them at just the right angle and distance to be sure that you're gonna kill them. It's especially funky when you're on a conveyor and both you and the Stalfos are getting pulled, or potentially moving in different directions even. The arrow on this Stalfos is a little inconsistent. I think he mostly just wants to save magic here, not going for the Fire Rod. Fire Rod kill is a little more consistent. At this point, I don't know if it would make much of a difference. Eventually getting him dead. Full magic for Lawnmowers too, so we can use the Fire Rod. A spin attack with the Tempered Sword does the same amount of damage as the Fire Rod, so if one of them comes at him here, he's going to probably just release that spin like that. Finish that one off. And 2 slashes and a Fire Rod is also enough. Just barely killing that last one in the second cycle. Love to see the Cane of Samaria being used for exactly what it's designed for, which is these Wizrow brooms in Ganon's tower. Nice use of it though. Has a little bit more magic coming into this room than would be the minimum. So he'll have a little bit of leniency to make a mistake, but it doesn't look like he's really going to make a mistake. Jumping into that hole to warp him to the door was actually intentional there. So we didn't have to worry about dodging that fireball in additional time. So of the 3 keys that I mentioned were optional earlier, or between them you only have to pick one. MaltZi actually got the key from on top of the torch and right at the beginning of this dungeon, instead of getting the one from one of those Helmosaurs or from this chest here. Still picking up the magic though. Which he actually definitely should be picking up. With using the Fire Rod only on Ganon, you need exactly a bar of magic in order to finish the fight, assuming you don't make any mistakes. So he had less than half of a bar of magic if he wants to use the Fire on Ganon, which he probably will. Hey, 20 rupees in that chest. How many people Knew that was there. This room with all the Helmosaurs here, the Helmosaurs are in the fairy pack, so if you use Ether there, you can kill all of them with one usage. And that actually has a decent chance of dropping a fairy, depending on where your prize packs are. That's a potential safety option, but what's really strange about that is if you use a medallion in that room specifically, when you do this Aghanim 2 fight, there's no knockback on the Aghanim when you hit him with a deflected attack. Actually just stays stationary. Which I don't know if that's a beneficial thing. I've never really tried to do the fight that way to see if it seemed easier or more difficult, but it's just a weird effect. Pretty good fight from him there. Alright, 3.5 hearts with the red mail. Unless he walks directly into Ganon, he's not going to die in only one hit, so he can take a hit from any of his other attacks. Alright, MaltZi's falling into the Ganon fight now. Get that one cheap shot on Ganon before the text box pops up. Something we kind of take for granted is that, because honestly without that, we really wouldn't be able to do a 1-in-1 cycle very easily at all. It's very close to be able to get the 1 cycle in both the first 2 phases. You know what? I don't think he was aiming for that torch there. I think he was just trying to shoot the hookshot for invulnerability and got pulled by accident. And unfortunately that pulled him right into the bat. But he'll be going in the second time with 8 hearts. So it'll be a much safer fight the second time. Waffle is doing a track called Big Blue, while MaltZi is fighting the Big Blue Pig. I don't know if there's some intentional thing there, if that's just a funny coincidence. Alright, two cycles on phase 1 this time from MaltZi. Looks like it might be 2 on phase 2 as well. If he can survive this, looks like he just will. Oh man, wow, I was very close a few times actually. But he should have him now, as long as he can avoid these bats this last time, which he is able to do. Into phase 3 now. If you hit Ganon early enough on each hit on phase 3, he does not do the radiating fire bat cycle there, but he does still advance the fight. So that is what you want to do for a little extra safety. Just hit him as quick as you can on each hit on the 3rd phase. All right, so every remaining attack that Ganon has does do greater than 1 heart of damage. So also needs to be sure not to get hit by any of these fire bats. Starting the fight with the lamp. We do see a lot of players doing that because timing the torch glitch can be a little bit sketchy, and it can maybe be a little bit easier or safer or more consistent to use the lamp than the fire rod, because it uses less magic and you're able to mash it to use it very quickly. With the fire rod, you can maybe double tap, but even then the speed of it is not nearly as fast as a couple of lamp usages. So you can get a little bit more safety maybe at the risk of a little magic, but not nearly as much safety as a lamp offers. He's keeping the lamp out for the entirety of phase 4, it looks like. He looks like he's getting doubles on most cycles. I have not been counting, but oh yeah, there we go, number 12. MaltZi finishing up the fight. A little bit of a rough run for him. Nice to see him finish it up. I probably wouldn't, if I'm being totally honest, if I died even once. But I'm kind of a rage quitter myself. So that's it for this race. Waffle's moving on in the brackets to round 2. MaltZi, unfortunately, is going to be eliminated here. This is a single elimination bracket. Every one of the races from here on out is an elimination race for somebody until the finals, which I do believe is a best of 3. And yeah, looks like MaltZi got some gold splits on that run, so that is definitely a good thing. Looking on the bright side there, I like to see that. So I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing interviews with people or something. I was kind of hoping somebody would just kind of tell me what to do at this point, because this is the first commentary I've done in a long time. Maybe Scrivo will give me some instructions here. I can do interviews if I want. Okay, MaltZi's in here. Waffle is not, though. I expected him to just kind of join if he wanted to come in. Or, oh, MaltZi left. Never mind. What time is it? It is 4 p.m. almost. At 4 p.m., there's going to be randomizer on at some channels. One on the main Speed Gaming channel. It's like a Hat in Time on Speed Gaming 3 and Wings of V on Speed Gaming 2. And a couple other randomizer games which have not established a channel yet. Speed Gaming 5 is showing randomizer right now. So if you want to see that, you can go over there already. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait 15 minutes or so for more randomizer or other game content. Go ahead and pull MaltZi in here. Chat with him a little bit. We got a few minutes. What's going on, MaltZi? GG there. I think he's here. Waffle is declining to do an interview. That's too bad. I don't know if MaltZi thinks he's talking and I can't hear him, or if there is a technical problem there.
I have to hold down the button here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going pretty good. It's a bit unfortunate that I failed the bosses in the way I did. I felt otherwise it was a pretty good run for me.
Yeah, you did get that mushroom for the potential to do fake powder there, but didn't choose to do that before Vitreous the first time. That might have been a spiral.
I don't really know how that works, and yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't mean to pick up the mushroom, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
I was going to go for like skip the powder and just go red mail.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. I didn't know that you got that by accident. So that whole time I was talking about that, and okay.
I saw in chat that people were talking about the fake powder, and I was like, yeah, I don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, nice. Well, it is a cool thing to learn. Maybe you can look into it and try it. Actually, in RTA, you probably won't need it. Maybe in randomizer or something if you continue doing those later.
I will look into how that works, since sometimes I pick up the powder. It's a bit about the consistency. So in my last race I did against, there was someone that needed to do an extra race to try and improve his time. And in that one, I skipped all the safeties except the red mail, and then I could do Meyer and those without dying. But this time I couldn't do that.
Right. Well, unfortunately, this does mean you're going to be eliminated from this tournament.
Yeah, I was expecting that, since Waffle has like a 125 or something.
Yeah, Waffle is I think 11th place maybe on the leaderboard, so he's definitely a top player. Definitely a tough matchup in the first round of the brackets for you.
Yeah, certainly.
Would you say you're pretty happy with your performance overall, though, in this tournament?
I would say so. I was expecting to perhaps get past the first bracket if I could have had a better first time, but there are so many good players now on sub 130, so it's hard to like get a favorable matchup now.
Yeah, there really are. Yeah, I remember just a few years ago, if you got a sub 130, that would make you a top 10 player, and now getting a sub 130 is barely top 100. So there's been a lot of new players coming in the last couple of years and doing real well.
Yeah, but with this run, I managed to get my sum of best to sub 130. So.
Oh, nice.
Now we just need to have all of them in a single run.
Yeah, that's the dream anyway.
Yeah, my sum of best is 4 minutes ahead of my PB now. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so you should definitely have one coming soon. Probably a big one even.
That's what I had when I lowered from 135 to 133. So I did a big 2-minute jump there. So perhaps I can do something similar again.
Yeah, you got to get the big ones out of the way early because pretty soon the big ones will stop coming. Once you get a sub 130, if you can get a 2-minute PB, that is huge.
I would say that's pretty impossible unless you're really, really good at skating, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, GG again. Thanks for talking to me here. I think we're going to... do you have any final words before we sign out here?
No. Yes, thanks for the commentary and good luck to Waffle in his next run.
All right. And with that, I think I'm going to sign off here now. If you stay tuned on this channel, looks like we have Wings of V coming up and a bunch of other stuff on other speed gaming channels, if that's what you're into. My name today has been Flash Toby Crackett, though a lot of people know me as something else. And yeah, thanks again. I'll see you all some other time.